shipping companies tasked with aid delivery to be investigated. 2 arrested for drug smuggling in Leh. And clan says fraudsters are hijacking resource project.
This is National EMTV News with Tokana Hasavi.
Good evening and thanks for joining me again this Friday. Owners of shipping companies responsible to deliver relief supplies to Gulf Province will be investigated and prosecuted. The National Maritime Safety Authority says the shipping vessels do not meet safety standards. Manager of Maritime Safety Standards and Compliance, Joseph Piawan, says the National Maritime Safety Authority has nothing to do with the delay in relief supplies to Gulf Province.
The National Maritime Safety Authority has been blamed by shipping companies West Coast Shipping and Mundi No. 1 Limited for failing to give them the clearance to sail their ships, resulting in the non-delivery of relief supplies to Gulf Province. But NMSA has no knowledge of West Coast Shipping, and Mundi No. 1 Limited has long-standing compliance issues.
NMSA, we don't do clearance for cargoes. Our mandated function under the National Maritime Safety Authority Act is to do safety inspections, and that is what we have been doing. So the ship was unsafe, so we detained the ship, and it's still under detention now.
This is MV Burai, one of 3 ships owned by Samson Jubi, the owner of Mundi No. 1 Limited. This was the vessel that was supposed to ferry the relief supplies to Gulf, but NMSA says it was grounded for sea unworthiness in 2014. The other 2 ships are MV Mundi No. 1, which is rusting away at the jetty, while MV Navigator sank in 2013 in Gulf Province. Joseph Piawan says if found that Mundi No. 1 Limited was operating its shipping vessels without clearance from NMSA, the owner will be charged and prosecuted.
To find out whether the owners have been operating this vessel. If they had been operating this vessel, they have been breaching certain provisions of the Merchant Shipping Act and the Criminal Code.
Sources close to the owners of the shipping companies West Coast Shipping and Mundi No. 1 Limited told EMTV News disaster coordinators from the Gulf Province allegedly colluded with the shipping companies to have the payments done with full knowledge of the issues facing the shipping companies. Yesterday, Kerema Open MP Richard Mendani and Kikori MP Mark Maipakai called on the disaster coordinator Jerry Hape to explain.
When that 3 million was released, it went into the hands of very few selected individuals who have over the years benefited out of any funds that have gone to it. They have always benefited out of it at the expense and suffering of the people of Kerema and Kikori.
This is why both of us have joined forces to fight this corruption against Gulf administration. This is not a very good sight for us. Our people are suffering. They're still waiting for supplies.
They have also called for investigations into these fishy deals to ensure justice is served on those involved. Mickey Cavera, National EMTV News.
2 men from Bulolo in Morabel Province were arrested this morning for marijuana trafficking into Leh City. One of them is a suspect on the run who is also wanted in connection for armed robbery and the alleged killing of a construction worker at the Kumalu Bypass project. Both men were tracked from Bulolo to Leh and were in possession of a kilogram of freshly harvested marijuana drugs. EMTV Silva Sagawi has this report from Leh.
At around 10 a.m. this morning, members of the Mobile Squad 13 based in Leh rounded the 2 men at Leh's highway bus stop. One was in possession of a kilogram of freshly harvested marijuana drugs, while the other a suspect on the run for a string of armed robberies, including the alleged murder of an expatriate at the Kumalu Bypass in 2009. Both men were brought in for questioning at the Leh Central Police Station and were later detained. Marijuana cultivation is a growing problem in Bulolo district. Police manpower shortage is said to be the biggest problem along the Bulolo highway. Marijuana trafficking into Leh and other districts has increased in the previous months.
Yeah, drug Bulolo big blessing.
also is a good development.
The increasing number of marijuana cultivation in rural areas and even in towns like Lae and Goroka have become a business for many people. Bulalo MP Sam Basil has blamed the national government's negligence on bringing tangible developments into rural communities, which resulted in people turning to illegal means for income generation. Sylvester Gawi, National MTV News, Lae.
Statistics of TB-reported cases at some of Morabe's urban health centres continue to increase. Officer in charge at Lae's Buimo Health Centre, Sister Miriam Key, says in a week the health centre collects more than 20 cases of normal tuberculosis registered for consultations. The health centre, though small and limited with facilities and manpower, gets a higher number of patients to deal with compared to its resources.
Tuberculosis patients that get referred from Engau's urban health centers to the Engau Hospital for diagnosis is increasing every year. Sister Miriam Key said the Buimo Health Center registers between 4 to 5 TB patients per day. That is more than 20 TB cases every week. As the TB cases continue to rise, limited facilities and manpower are problems Buimo Health Center faces every day.
These two basic things: facility, manpower, and also to expand our DOT program to our partners, have more partners, maybe churches in the communities or women's group or whoever can volunteer to help us to fight this.
Last year, the Buimo Health Center registered 486 TB cases. 2 of these cases have been referred to Engau Hospital as multi-drug resistant. Health professionals say with the current statistics they have, the number could go past last year's records.
The TB clinic that we have now was built in the 80s. So with the current population trend, it's not enough for them anymore. We feel we need more space to meet the population demand there.
While main hospitals like Lae's Engau Hospital continue to do tests for most of Morabe's urban and rural health centers, these clinics can reduce the number of referrals to Engau if more TB facilities were given to the clinics. Colin Barilai, National MTV News, Lae.
More awareness is needed to address cancer in the country. That's from Cancer Foundation of PNG Chief Executive Officer Daddy Toka Jr. He said the number of cancer patients has increased. However, there is only one cancer treatment facility. MTV's Eric Harupma has more on this report.
Cancer Foundation, in partnership with health authorities, will drive awareness campaigns for cancer into the rural areas. Cancer Foundation CEO Daddy Toka said this organization will address this issue using the existing health facilities as an avenue to conduct workshops and screening.
I think, well, the Department of Health doesn't have the manpower, hence the reason why they look for stakeholders to help them, delivering certain services. So it's, we can't spread ourselves too thin. Okay, so this is where we, let's look for a central location.
This NGO is also aiming to provide cancer awareness programs to the 7 million people of this country. Awareness campaigns will include detecting and diagnosing mouth, cervical and breast cancer. Volunteers will be engaged to conduct educational awareness to educate people about this disease. However, with only one radiotherapy machine in Engau General Hospital to treat cancer patients, more awareness is needed to reach the 7 million people in the rural areas. Meanwhile, screening and workshops will be conducted in health facilities around the country. Eric Arupma, National MTV News.
Landowners from the Pacific Maritime Industrial Zone, or PMIZ, in Madang are furious that the national government has acknowledged the PMIZ as a Project Impact People concept. Children of landowners took to the seas to protest in front of the PMIZ fenced area with placards reading, "We own the land and sea, Kanaman people want their land title back." Other issues protested were the concerns of waste from a fishing company destroying the environment and the social issue of young girls and women being forced into the sex for fish trade by Asians. The landowners say they are being denied their rights and are forbidden to access the PMIZ area for fishing as it is guarded by police. They expressed concerns that they now have become drifters in their own land. Over 2,000 residents in Port Moresby will be disconnected as Ediranu begins its disconnection exercise. The major disconnection exercise comes after residents failed to pay water bills despite being notified. Majority of the residents disconnected today were illegal water users.
The suburb of Gero was identified as a prime location for illegal water connections and high outstanding water bills. This morning, Ediranu technical team with members of the police force took on streets in Gero Stage 1 to disconnect water taps. The disconnection exercise comes as water users fail to respond to notices sent out by Ediranu.
We're only targeting those who haven't been paying or who was on legal connections, and even though we give them notice, then they still decided to be on legal connections. We resort to the last resort, which is to carry out the main disconnection.
Mr. Gore, who heads Ediranu's commercial section, says not only residential areas are targeted, but business houses and commercial industries.
Once we do that, we actually allow people to be responsible, and they have to resort to water-saving methods. So then there's water enough in the system for people that are beg and for future needs.
The disconnection exercise started on the 10th of March and will follow through the next 2 months, including other parts of the city. But not all residents were in tune with the disconnections. Some alleged that Ediranu staff had also failed to fix broken taps and valves upon their report.
Mitla been explaining amas flat time lolo all back come now. Change it mitablo mitla. Then mitla totogo now no been coming.
Ediranu says once water bills are paid, connections will be made.
Like it's just not fair on paying customers for others to be paying and subsidizing all the rest. As soon as fees are paid, whatever, we will come back and reconnect.
Over 8,000 notices were sent to residents, but only 300 made attempts to pay up bills, with about 3,000 customers blacklisted as illegal water users. Jack Lapavi Jr., National EMTV News.
You're watching National EMTV News this Friday. We'll be back with more local headlines after the break. Stay with us. To have you back with National EMTV News. Customary landowners in the autonomous region of Bougainville now have the right to say no to exploration and mining licenses. This is the basis of the new Bougainville mining law that was passed today by the autonomous Bougainville government. Our journalist in Buka, Fabian Hakelitz, has more.
From the Bougainville Mining Transitional Arrangements Act 2014, today the Bougainville House of Representatives passed this new mining law that is now called the Bougainville Mining Act 2015. Another historical achievement for Bougainville is the new mining law that recognizes customary land owners. Autonomous Bougainville Government's Minerals and Energy Resources Minister Michael Oni.
It's a good sign for Bougainville. Bougainville has completed its task of transferring the mining powers and functions to this government, and I'm very grateful.
The aspect of this new law allows landowners to participate in mining projects entitled to 5% pre-equity and royalties.
We are starting off with free equity, which will be 5%, and then we also have an option of purchasing and other 5% for the landowners.
Oni said the new law empowers ABG to raise its internal revenue and for landowners through putting exploration licenses out for international bidding. Meantime, Bougainville President Chief Dr. John Momis clarified the mining law isn't about reopening Panguna mine, but for the autonomous Bougainville government's mining powers ownership. However, Bougainville President Chief Dr. John Momis has brushed aside critics, saying that this mining law will not benefit Bougainville. President Momis says it's historic for Bougainville as this law gives power, rights and protection to customary land owners and direct participation of Bougainvillians into the mining industry. In Buka, Fabian Hakelitz, National EMTV News.
A faction representing a clan in the Stanley Gas project in Kiunga, Western Province, is calling on the government to fast-track the clan vetting process. They claim that the previous clan vetting and the BSA signing were hijacked overnight by paper landowners, and they want proper clan vetting. They have objected the demands by Stanley Resource Holdings, the umbrella company, which they claim doesn't represent genuine landowners.
This group is represented by Betty Wine from Horediasu clan of Grehosore village. She was accompanied by Wasa Sowati of Hore Loknai village, both from PDL 10 area, and principal landowner of Stanley Gas Pipeline, Deya Aunip. They are opposing the Stanley Resource Holdings, the company that's said to be the umbrella company, representing all landowners and people in the impact areas.
The whole Stanley Gas project was hijacked from the real genuine landowners, well-head landowners of the PDL, people like Imen Papa and Rex Ipe.
They are not the real landowners. We are the only landowners in Block 1623. We have been spectators now.
Into land issues. I think that's the cause of the delay in the project. Because the people are not honest enough with the government. People using false pretense to defraud the state.
They have demanded that the Department of Trade, Commerce and Industry must not release any business development grants until a proper clan vetting is conducted. Meanwhile, executives of Stanley Resource Holdings, Chairman Rex Ipe and Imen Papa, have refuted this, claiming they have followed all the right procedures and now await the release of the 15 million kina business development grants.
That the umbrella company issue has been solved already. Now today we wanted to bring those business grants down, and we have 4 segments company, so within the project area will have that money and distribute it amongst the license companies and the umbrella company.
Now we are concentrating on the business development part, which is the formation of companies, segment companies.
Recently, Minister for Trade, Commerce and Industry Richard Maru called a meeting with his secretary and the Petroleum and Energy Secretary to resolve the issue.
To resolve very quickly which landowner companies are entitled to the business development grant.
The details of the meeting are yet to be disclosed. However, in a statement, Secretary for Trade, Commerce and Industry John Andreas clarified that to date there is no recognized umbrella company. He urged all landowners to work together with the developer, the state and realign where necessary. He says the business development grants for Stanley Gas will not be released until landowners and their companies are recognized well. Secretary Andreas warned that any misleading and false claims by any landowner relating to BDGs for Stanley Gas condensate project will be dealt with by appropriate authorities. Bridget Komatep, National EMTV News.
The appointment of Provincial Administrator for Eastern Highlands Province by the National Executive Council has delayed service delivery. Former SRC President of UPNG and Eastern Highlander, Peter Numu, expressed concerns over this issue. Mr. Numu is calling on the Eastern Highlands Provincial Executive Council to resolve the difference with Solomon Tato, the Provincial Administrator.
The issue was brought up on the floor of Parliament in the February session by Eastern Islands Governor Julie Soso, accusing the National Executive Council for not exhausting all consultation processes when making this appointment. The former Student Representative Council President of UPNG, who was also vocal in opposing the government's decision on asylum seekers deal and the death penalty, says the appointment is delaying service delivery in the province.
Eastern Highlands, many of our electorates, for example, my area in Hungai area, we've suffered since independence. There's no basic government service, no roads. So as other remote areas like Hobura 1.
He says this is suppressing the people of Eastern Islands from receiving basic services.
The PEC and the appointment, the newly appointed provincial administrator is now costing our province. We want to move on. Our people need basic service. That's their right to the service. And the government has already allocated funds for services. And this continuous difference between provincial administrator and PEC is now suppressing the people.
Major projects in the province like the 30 million Kina Goroka Market Redevelopment Project is yet to be tendered, and Mr. Numu says this is due to the situation at the provincial administration. All Eastern Highland students attending tertiary institutions have been called to support this call by seeking national government's intervention in resolving this matter.
Eastern Highlands University students, tertiary, or those who are attending tertiary institutions, you know, we represent different electorates. We come from different communities, and together, I want us to stand up, raise our voice as a concerned citizens, raise our voice and say, solve this issue once and for all, because we are dying of government service.
Michelle Amba, National EMTV News.
Due to the slow release of funds, the Hoskins-Koimumu Road in West New Britain has been left to deteriorate. Village leaders at Galilo in the Hoskins area of West New Britain are concerned about the failing state of the road. It has worsened over the years with little work done this far.
The 28-kilometer Hoskins-Koimumu Road is a major road network in the Hoskins area of Thalassa district. Initial funding was 4.8 million kina for the first stage, but the slow release of funds has now seen the road crumbled and defaced to a sorry sight. No proper seawalling and the continuous rain experience in the province has also added to the appalling state of the road. Locals say if authorities are too slow in maintaining the road, villages along the Hoskins-Koimumu Road will be cut off. Local construction company Nivani Limited has been working on credit basis. The Department of Works owes a balance of 3.8 million kina to Nivani. However, the recent visit by Works Minister Francis Awesa saw a presentation of 1 million kina to Nivani for further work and upgrade. But the second stage will require another 5 million kina to fully seal the road. West New Britain Governor Sasindra Muthuvel says the road is vital, but the government has caused further delays in its progress. Funding for Thalassa Ring Road and Kimbe-Kendrian Road was also withdrawn by the national government last year without proper reasons. Jack Lapave Jr., National EMTV News.
Adjustments have been made to the Papua New Guinea forest policy to accommodate measures to address climate change. This comes as effects of climate change are felt throughout the nation through natural disasters like floods and landslides. Director of Forest Research Institute in Lae, Professor Simon Saule, says planting trees can minimize damages caused by natural disasters.
The adjustments include trading mechanisms like conservation and preservation of forest areas in Papua New Guinea. In its attempts to reduce the effects of climate change in already affected areas, Professor Saule and his team of researchers is now working on directives spelled out by the national government in the Vision 2015.
So we have policy for downstream processing, increasing acreage of plantations, so that reliance on natural forest will be less and much of the resources will be coming out from the plantations.
In recent weeks, numerous floods in Medang, Morobe and West New Britain has cut off road links, education and communication services for villages living along the highways. Coastal villages have seen increase in sea levels, forcing people to relocate to higher grounds, and highlands provinces are now becoming cooler than what they used to be a decade ago.
That we are going to increase the acreage of plantation forest up to 60 or 80,000 hectares.
The change in the forest policy will give communities the responsibility to look after their trees and minimize the effects of climate change. When observing the International Day of Forest today, boxes of acacia and clinky pine trees were given to schools and partners to plant in their communities as a measure to minimize the effects of climate change. Tekla Gunga, National EMTV News, Lae.
And now we check out the finance news. The kina closed unchanged at $0.3745 in the interbank market, and at Bank South Pacific, the kina was buying $0.367 $0.4657 Australian dollars, $0.3330 euro, and 43.31 Japanese yen. Looking at commodity prices at New York close, gold, coffee and copper closed the day higher, while cocoa closed the day lower. Palm oil and copper closed higher, while crude oil closed the day lower. And finally, on the stock market, the Dow Jones closed at 40 points lower, the ASX closed at 40 points higher, and the All Ordinaries closed at 39 points higher. We're bringing stories making headlines overseas when we come back, including the funeral service for former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser and the latest on Germanwings Flight 9525. Stay with us. Good to have you back with National EMTV News. Turning overseas now, family and friends of former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser today filled Scott's Church in Melbourne for his state funeral. Mr. Fraser rose to power during one of the most turbulent periods in Australian politics and served as Prime Minister between November 1975 and March 1983. He died last week after a brief illness, aged 84.
A procession of prime ministers past and present, diplomats and defence top brass gathered to farewell a giant of Australian politics.
We've gathered here today to give thanks to God for the life of the Right Honourable John Malcolm Fraser.
In the church he chose for himself, Malcolm Fraser was remembered and honoured.
He loved Australia. He was not merely one of its sons, but one of its most fervent custodians. I feel the world is slightly less safe now.
As a politician, he was considered cool and aloof. To his family, he was anything but. Granddaughter Rachel gave insights into life at home.
Granddad's favourite film was The Bodyguard because of Whitney Houston. And every time I stayed with him, he would ask Granny and I if we wanted to watch it, as if we had never seen it before.
And spoke of his innate curiosity and uptake of social media.
I still remember the cheeky grin on his face when he said, "I've got 20,000 followers. How many do you have, Rach?"
Is your stand still firm?
Malcolm Fraser became Prime Minister in the most controversial of circumstances, but his colleagues say he was always destined for success.
He showed enormous courage and strength, never once displaying weakness. And it's history now that the people of Australia elected him as Prime Minister with his largest majority in the nation's history.
He went on to win 2 more elections.
Malcolm Fraser has gone. Much has been written and said, some of it gratuitous, most of it praiseworthy. One thing is certain, the country has lost a unique and great Australian.
He ran the country but worked tirelessly as the member for Wannon, even arranging for a TV tower to be moved from Canberra to his electorate.
There was a bit of controversy in Canberra about that, but he was loved in the local electorate for having delivered decent TV services.
Hundreds gathered outside the church, including members of Melbourne's Vietnamese community, who benefited from Mr Fraser's immigration policies.
Later on, when Malcolm Fraser, he met with me, he just said, Phong, you people proved that I was right.
Mr Fraser is survived by his wife Tammy, 4 children and grandchildren.
Granny and Grandad together had an unbreakable bond and understanding of one another. They both created an unparalleled history like no other. Grandad would always make mention of Granny's constant love and support and was openly grateful for how lucky he was to have her in his life.
Above all, it matters that you've been loved. Nothing else matters.
The co-pilot of Germanwings Flight 9525 purposely crashed the plane into the French Alps, killing all 150 people on board. This has now raised concerns about any psychological problems he may have had and the kind of screening that all pilots go through.
Lufthansa's CEO says there'd been no sign of mental instability with co-pilot Andreas Lubitz, that the 28-year-old had passed a psychological exam when he was hired. After that,
Once a year, we have a medical test. There are no further tests that are expressly psychological.
Now, airlines are under fire for what critics say are dangerous gaps in the system. Current and former pilots tell us the level of psychological screening for pilots around the world is random and often depends on the airline. Commercial pilot Les Aben says his airline grilled him on his personality.
Do you like your mother? Do you hate your mother? Do you like your father? Do you hate your... do you abuse small animals?
Aben says some airlines interview a pilot's friends to see if they've got psychological or emotional issues. But government regulations are not as strict. The FAA says pilots can't fly if they've got bipolar disorder or similar problems. FAA rules say pilots have to undergo a medical exam every year or 6 months. Aben says those exams don't place a heavy emphasis on psychological screening. Forensic psychiatrist Lisa Van Susteren says that doesn't cut it. If the screening is merely adequate and they're lumping psychological screening in with medical screening, is it possible for the person to dupe the screener?
It's absolutely possible. Most psychological evaluations are simply checklists, and a person will answer, and the evaluator will look down to mark it on his paper, never looking to see what kind of body language. Maybe the person withdraws or does something that gives you a clue that there's some sort of stress or anxiety in answering the question.
Another problem? Pilots say the airlines don't check periodically to see if something's come up in a pilot's personal life that may lead to a psychological breakdown, like a marital or financial issue. And they're not required to check for that. It's up to a pilot to self-report. If he or she doesn't self-report, what happens?
If you don't self-report, it's gone unnoticed. Typically what happens is if you have an issue, one of your crew members might recognize something like that.
The FAA did not respond to our questions about the criticism of that system. Some current and former pilots argue that the rules don't need to be tightened. They say the vast majority of pilots are mentally stable and that the self-reporting guidelines work. But critics say there are still some very dangerous gaps in the system, that out of fear of losing their careers, pilots either won't self-report psychological issues, or if they do seek psychological counseling, they won't tell their bosses.
Saudi Arabia says it will continue its military campaign against Houthi rebels in Yemen, but the rebels are threatening a deadly response. Saudi Arabia is backed by allied forces that may soon include the United States.
In Yemen's capital, devastating airstrikes from Saudi Arabia. A new offensive to drive out Iranian-backed rebels who seized control of the capital and key military sites. Officials say the Saudi campaign was quickly planned, catching top U.S. military commanders off guard.
General Austin, when were you told by the Saudis that they were going to take military action in Yemen?
Sir, I had a conversation with the Chad right before they took action, so it was shortly before.
Before they took action?
Yes, sir.
That's very interesting.
The White House has already committed significant assistance. The U.S. military is helping the Saudis plan bombing missions over Yemen, providing targeting intelligence from satellites overhead and making AWACS surveillance planes and aerial refueling aircraft available as well. The general says he doesn't know if it will all work.
I don't currently know the specific goals and objectives of the Saudi campaign, and I'd have to know that to be able to assess the likelihood of success.
The U.S. military involvement as sensitive as it gets. Saudi Arabia is backing beleaguered Yemeni President Hadi, who has fled his country. The rebels are backed by Iran. The U.S. worries terror groups will exploit the chaos.
There's a lot at stake here, particularly with al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and ISIS, both active in Yemen. But let's face the facts. The U.S. is involved now in a proxy war between the Saudis and the Iranians.
Iran condemning the intervention.
It's a very dangerous situation, and we advise against any escalation because we believe that any interference in Yemen will simply lead to further loss of human life.
And National EMTV News continues with Trukai Sports. That's coming up next. All the sporting details after these short messages.
True Kai Sports.
Welcome to True Kai Sports. Papua New Guinea's top-performing sportsmen and sportswomen will be named tomorrow at the 2015 SP Sports Awards. The most prominent event on the sports calendar, the awards will be held at the Holiday Inn in the nation's capital. There are 12 categories and finalists of the Male Athlete of the Year category that include Israel Eliab, Stephen Curry, Legacy Yaka, and also the finalists of the Female Athletes of the Year category include Abigail Terry Apisa, Dikatoa and Toya Whistle. EMTV's Lorraine Genia is up against Kundu 2's Efata Samuel and NBC's Paul Talmik in the sports media category. All the best of luck to her. The East New Britain province was one of the first provinces to roll out the curriculum-based development program last year. Schools within the Rabaul district kicked off the Pacific and Union season for 2015 on a high note. World Rugby rep Sam Tung went to Rabaul to gauge some of the province's raw rugby talents.
Schools within the Rabaul district have commenced the Pacific and Union program for 2015 on a high note. World Rugby TV representative Sam Tung is in the East New Britain province to capture some of Papua New Guinea's raw rugby talent.
You can see we have our rugby union players.
The ENB province has proven to be the most successful with the PRU program, and in particular, Tavui Primary School. ENB was the first province to select and confirm a women's sevens team to compete in the 6th PNG Games. The team was identified through the PRU program. National Coaching Director Sydney Wesley confirmed the current curriculum-based development program has and will continue to contribute to the development of both junior rugby and women's rugby in Papua New Guinea.
The talent that will be identified to represent Papua New Guinea there will come out of PRU program, the PRU program. And from results from last year, I know the girls, after just less than a year playing rugby union, went over to Leia. He did well in Leia. It was the silver. Yeah, got silver there, so I'm sure you'll play a bigger part in the makeup of the Commonwealth Games team to go to Samoa.
This year, the 6 participating schools are looking forward to their second year of PRU and are working towards improving the standard of rugby nationwide. Lorraine Genia, National EMTV Sports, Rabaul.
This weekend, the Oil Search Pacific Games Relay will begin their journey throughout the 22 provinces of Papua New Guinea. The East New Britain province have revealed their plans to host the baton from the 14th to the 17th of June. Relay coordinator Jelta Wong says the province's main objective is to showcase their cultural diversity and their significance in PNG's history.
The East New Britain province holds a significant part in Papua New Guinea's history. In 1942, Rabaul fell to the Japanese, becoming the hub of World War II between Australia and Japan. 6 decades later, all that remains of this bloodshed period is on display here in Rabaul. Jelta Wong, coordinator of the East New Britain Relay Committee, is planning to use the relay as an opportunity to showcase much of Rabaul's historical significance.
Places where are significant to the history of Papua New Guinea, where we have a war museum. We have 2 actually. One based in Rabaul and one here in Kokopo.
These tunnels are one of the many historical sites that the Games Relay team will visit while here in the East New Britain province. The committee so far has only received 5,000 kina from the Pacific Games to run the 3-day visit. However, Jelta says they are currently working on proposing ideas to several businesses within the private sector to support the event.
But we try to push the private sector a lot because it's showcasing the place where they're doing business, and it's also showcasing the place where we live and why we love it so much here.
Apart from the memorial sites situated in Rabaul, the relay's visit will also comprise of a number of tours to renowned tourism attractions. Rabaul's history does not only include the significance with World War II, but also the eruption of Mount Tavudvud in 1994. This location here at the Rababa Hot Springs will be one of the sites that the Games Relay team visits during their stay here in the East New Britain province. Lorraine Genia, National EMTV Sports, Rabaul.
And True Guy Sports continues after the break. Stay with us.
True Guy Sports.
Welcome back to True Guy Sports. Among our sporting headlines overseas, Australia prepares to take on its nemesis in the Cricket World Cup final. The joint hosts of the Cricket World Cup, Australia and New Zealand, are set to meet in a dream final of the one-day tournament on Sunday.
The Aussies were swarmed by fans when they arrived in Melbourne this afternoon ahead of the MCG showdown with their arch nemesis, the Kiwis. Opening batsman Aaron Finch is confident Australia can win their record 5th World Cup. Roosters coach Trent Robinson is certain Blake Ferguson will be at his best when he faces his old club, the Canberra Raiders, for the first time in their round 4 clash in the NRL this Sunday. The Raiders sacked Ferguson in 2013 after several off-field incidents.
Wherever it was going to be, there was always going to be a talking point around Blake playing Canberra. I still remember when Sonny played Canterbury. It was a huge talking point, and people focused on Sonny versus Canterbury, and Sonny focused on the Roosters versus Canterbury, and that's the way to handle it. That's the way that Blake needs to handle it, and that's the way that we need to as well. So.
And Australian golfer Aaron Baddeley is outright second after the opening round of the Texas Golf Open. He's sitting just 1 shot off the pace on 4 under after carding 68 for the round.
And you can catch NRL action tonight between the South Sydney Rabbitohs and Parramatta Eels. That's at 7:30. And that wraps up our sporting segment tonight. I'll be back with the weather details. Stay tuned.
Sky Sports. True Guy Sports.
A quick look at the weather forecast for tonight and tomorrow in southern region, Port Moresby and Carama to anticipate brief showers. In Momase, fine weather expected in Madang, Wewak and Bunnymoor. In the New Guinea Islands, all centres to look forward to fine weather. And lastly, in the Highlands region, all centres isolated showers, then morning fog. Now, before we go, quickly recapping our top stories again tonight. Shipping companies tasked with aid delivery to be investigated, 2 arrested for drug smuggling in Lae, and Clan says fraudsters are hijacking resource project. And that's how we wrap up the bulletin this Friday. On behalf of the news crew, I'm Tokana Hasavi. You have a safe weekend. Take care and stay safe. Good night.